A story of betrayal and redemption. Sophia's heartbeat raced as she stepped onto Alexander's private mountain estate. Her satin gown billowed gently around her 7-month pregnant body, glowing with anticipation. She thought this would be the night to mark a new chapter in her life, a night to celebrate their love. The candles flickered, casting a soft glow on the polished marble, and champagne flowed freely from crystal flutes. She smiled, feeling as though everything was falling into place. But beneath the glittering surface, something felt wrong. It was in the air, the way Alexander was acting. Too calm, too distracted. She watched as he spoke to Marcella, his so-called business associate. But it wasn't the kind of conversation she'd expect between colleagues. No, the words they exchanged were far too intense, too secretive. As Sophia approached them, she caught the tail end of their conversation. Alexander's voice was low, almost a whisper. "We can't back out now. We've come too far." Marcella's response was cold, almost calculating. "I know. She'll be out of the picture soon enough." Sophia froze, her chest tightening. What were they talking about? Her instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. Alexander hadn't noticed her, but Marcella had. The way she turned to face Sophia, with a sly smile, sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't the smile of a friend, or even a neutral acquaintance. It was the smile of someone who had already made up their mind about her fate. Sophia tried to back away, to retreat from the horror slowly creeping into her mind. But before she could move, Marcella's cold, unforgiving hand shot out and shoved her forward, toward the edge of the mountain terrace. "Alexander!" she screamed, but her voice was drowned by the howling wind. Her body plunged into the darkness below, the cold night air swallowing her whole. She flailed for a moment, the weight of her pregnant belly dragging her down as she tumbled through the forest slope. The shock was worse than the pain. The estate's lights continued to glow above, growing smaller as she fell further down the mountainside. Alexander's silhouette remained visible at the terrace's edge, not moving, not calling for help. He simply stood there, watching her disappear into the darkness. The sound of laughter, Marcella's laughter, rang through the night air. It was the sound of victory, of a plan fulfilled. But Sophia wasn't finished yet. The cold ground scraped against her skin, but she would not go quietly. She wouldn't let them win. "Alexander," she whispered, but no one was there to hear her. The words fell into the forest, lost as the estate lights continued to shine, indifferent to her fate. Sophia's body tumbled deeper into the ravine, the branches and rocks pounding against her, relentless and unforgiving. The truth struck her with more force than the fall itself. This had been planned. She thought back to the strange calls Alexander had been making in the dead of night. His sudden interest in her life insurance policy. The way he'd insisted she update her will last month, citing the pregnancy as a reason to protect their future. The pieces clicked together as she fell, each revelation more painful than the physical impact of her body against the slope. She remembered his subtle manipulation over the past few months. How he'd convinced her close friends that she was becoming unstable. How he'd suggested to her family that pregnancy hormones were affecting her judgment. He had been isolating her methodically, preparing the world to accept her disappearance or death as something inevitable. Every instinct told her to fight, but the weight of her gown, the strain of the baby inside her, and the overwhelming shock made it harder with each passing second. Her mind flashed to the safe deposit box she'd secretly rented last year, the one containing copies of Alexander's questionable financial transactions she'd discovered accidentally. He never knew she'd found them, never suspected she'd made copies. That small act of self-preservation now seemed prophetic. The hope of someone, anyone, seeing her, of someone throwing her a lifeline or even glancing back, faded into nothing. There was no rescue. The estate had already vanished from view, the laughter of Marcella still echoing in her ears. It was as if she never existed. Sophia gasped for air as pain shot through her body. The agony of betrayal was sharper than the physical torment that enveloped her. How had it come to this? She had been married to Alexander for so long, loved him with everything she had. But now she realized it wasn't love he had given her. It was a lie. A strong hand grabbed her arm, pulling her from a shallow stream at the base of the mountain. Sophia couldn't see the face of the man who found her, her eyes barely open, the world spinning. He dragged her onto the bank, each motion careful but urgent. She coughed violently as water poured from her lungs, her body convulsing. She gasped, trying to focus on the figure above her. The world was dim and blurry, but the life inside her was strong. Too strong to let go. The park ranger didn't speak at first, just pressing his hands gently against her injuries, checking for broken bones. Sophia gasped for breath, her baby kicking fiercely, as if it knew the danger had passed. She wasn't dead. She was alive, and so was her child. "Where am I?" she croaked, barely able to form the words. The ranger didn't answer immediately. He simply looked down at her with tired, weathered eyes. "Safe," he said softly, his voice thick with concern. "You're safe now." Sophia stared at him, trying to make sense of everything. She had been left for dead, but she wasn't. She was alive, and so was her baby. But now what? Bruised, cold, and drenched, Sophia sat up slowly, her hand over her stomach, feeling the life inside her. The mountain had taken so much from her dignity, her love, her trust, but it hadn't taken her strength. It hadn't taken her will to survive. As the ranger helped her to his vehicle, Sophia glimpsed a newspaper on his dashboard. The date shocked her. She'd been unconscious for nearly 2 days. The headline was even more startling. "Search continues for missing socialite Sophia Montgomery." There was her photo, an old one from a charity gala, Alexander standing beside her with his practiced, perfect smile. The article quoted him as being devastated and desperate for answers. The ranger followed her gaze. "That you?" he asked, his voice showing no judgment, just quiet concern. Sophia hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Yes, but there's something you should know." She swallowed hard, her throat raw. "I didn't fall. I was pushed." The ranger's weathered face hardened. He studied her for a long moment. "I found drag marks at the edge of that terrace," he said finally. "And it's not the first time the Montgomery family has had accidents on that mountain." His eyes met hers. "You're not the first, but you might be the first to survive." She looked toward the distant lights of civilization, her thoughts cold and calculating. Alexander thought she was gone. The world would think she had fallen in a tragic accident. A sad end to a woman who had once been the picture of love and grace. That was exactly what they wanted. They had tried to erase her. But now she wasn't just surviving. She was planning. "They think I'm gone," she whispered to herself, her voice steady. "Let them." And with that determination in her eyes, she turned toward the ranger's cabin, her mind set on revenge. It was time for them to learn what happens when you push someone too far. The empire they'd built would crumble, and Sophia would be the one to tear it down. Sophia didn't cry when Dominic opened the door. She didn't need to. The look on his face said enough. He didn't ask why she was alive. He didn't ask how she'd survived the fall. His first question cut to the heart of the matter. "Why did you ever trust Alexander?" That's when she knew he'd suspected more than he ever let on. Inside his apartment, walls were covered in old photos, newspaper clippings, and printed emails. Alexander's face circled in red. Marcella's name underlined in black. A death certificate with Sophia's name was in a frame. Dominic wasn't shocked she'd survived. He was shocked she hadn't seen the truth sooner. "How long have you known?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic turned toward his evidence wall. "Ever since my father died." The circumstances were convenient for Alexander. Too convenient. He touched a newspaper clipping about the elder Montgomery's sudden heart attack. Alexander inherited everything except what was protected in the trust. He wanted that too. The ranger had driven her to Dominic's apartment under cover of darkness. She'd given only her first name, but when she mentioned Alexander Montgomery, something in the ranger's eyes had changed. "I know someone who can help you," he'd said. That someone was Dominic, Alexander's half-brother from their father's first marriage, the son who'd been gradually pushed out of the family business. They didn't waste time. Dominic handed her a file full of login passwords, old medical scans, and emails between Alexander and bribed doctors. Forged medical reports told lies about her mental state. Her pregnancy was labeled non-viable, even when it was healthy. Everything had been planned. Her fall wasn't an accident. The disappearance wasn't random. They'd been rewriting her story before she even realized it. "They've been building this narrative for months," Dominic explained, showing her emails dated from the beginning of her pregnancy. "Alexander started consulting with a crisis management team the week after you told him about the baby." Dominic whispered things no one else could have known, like how Alexander offered money to cover the fake death, and how Marcella posed as her medical proxy. Sophia watched her own death flicker across a laptop screen. A pre-written obituary, ready to publish, describing her as emotionally fragile and struggling with the pressures of pregnancy. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. They didn't just want her gone. They wanted her story, her name, her life, and they nearly pulled it off. Then Dominic clicked on a folder that had been locked for years. He'd cracked the password. Inside were financial statements, shell companies, and wire transfers. Sophia's eyes widened. Marcella's name was everywhere. She wasn't just living a lie. She was laundering millions through Sophia's inheritance, hiding it behind fake companies tied to her name. But why does Alexander need Marcella? Sophia asked, struggling to understand the full scope of their scheme. He already has everything. Not everything, Dominic said grimly. Father made sure of that. Sophia sat in a parked car outside the estate gates, staring through tinted windows. Her heart clenched as she saw Marcella laughing with decorators on the balcony. The same balcony where Alexander had once promised her forever. Marcella moved like she owned the place, barefoot, wearing Sophia's silk robe, drinking from Sophia's crystal glass. She even wore the same scent. It was all wrong. That wasn't her home anymore. It was a stolen stage for someone else's lie. Inside, hidden security footage played on Dominic's laptop. Marcella had turned Sophia's dream home into her personal palace. She changed nothing, kept the paintings, the furniture, even the baby room Sophia had designed. Only now the crib was filled with fake gifts and press clippings. Marcella had copied Sophia's shopping lists, leaving notes like pregnancy craving, vanilla cake, in Sophia's handwriting. She wasn't just pretending to be pregnant. She was pretending to be Sophia. She studied you for years, Dominic said quietly. Even before you met Alexander. She was obsessed with your life, your style, everything about you. I found her old social media accounts, ones she thought she'd deleted. She was following you long before Alexander brought her into the company. The realization hit Sophia like a physical blow. She hadn't just been betrayed, she'd been hunted, targeted, selected. And Alexander had been the perfect accomplice for Marcella's twisted ambitions. Alexander, on the other hand, was busy planning a sympathy-fueled proposal. He hired PR agents to shape the story. Tragic loss leads to new beginnings. The media was already being fed lines about a strong man recovering from heartbreak. But Sophia saw it for what it really was, performance. Alexander didn't look sad in the pictures. He looked focused, calculated. This wasn't grief. It was strategy. Then Dominic handed her a flash drive. You need to see this. On the screen was an encrypted file buried deep in legal records. It took minutes to open, but when it did, Sophia froze. It was a trust document, an $800 million inheritance linked to her unborn child. Not Alexander, not Marcella. Her child. Sophia's fingers trembled as she read the trust file. It was written by Alexander's late father. The document was clear. Whoever had a legitimate child with Alexander, born in wedlock, would automatically inherit the majority of the estate. Sophia had been that woman. Her child had been that heir. My father knew Alexander too well, Dominic explained, his voice hard with old pain. He knew his son would marry for convenience, not love. So he made sure any grandchild would be protected, regardless of what Alexander did. The trust bypasses Alexander completely. It goes directly to his legitimate child. Everything started to make sense. Why the sudden push for separation? Why the lies? The staged fall? The fake diagnosis? It wasn't just about jealousy. It was about money, control, power. But why Marcella? Sophia asked. Alexander could remarry anyone. Dominic's expression darkened. Marcella isn't just anyone. She has leverage over him, the kind that could destroy everything he's built. Marcella could never be the rightful heir-bringer. She wasn't married to Alexander, and Alexander's father made sure no woman could manipulate the empire unless she followed his rules. But Sophia had, and her child growing inside her had been the golden ticket. That's why they needed her gone. Not dead, not broken, but legally vanished. A missing person couldn't claim anything, and a baby never born couldn't inherit. Every detail now screamed truth. The lies in the reports, the silent treatment from Alexander before the accident, the sudden PR campaign painting Marcella as a miracle woman carrying hope. It was all planned to remove Sophia and replace her with a puppet. They've already filed preliminary paperwork, Dominic said, showing her legal documents dated just days after her disappearance. Once you're declared legally dead, which they're pushing for on an accelerated timeline, they'll claim your child was never viable. Alexander will marry Marcella, and they'll use a surrogate or adopt. The trust will be contested, tied up in courts for years while they drain it dry. But the puppet wasn't enough, not without the heir. Dominic leaned closer, showing her another file. A hidden draft will, never filed but clearly signed. In it, Alexander's father left everything to Sophia's child, provided proof of birth and marriage existed. And they did. Somewhere in the hospital's hidden backups, the records still lived. Dominic promised to find them. But now they had more than revenge. They had legal power. I have a contact at the hospital, Dominic said. She can access the original records. The real ones, not the forgeries Alexander planted. It'll take time, but we can prove your pregnancy was viable, that the child is legitimate. Sophia stared at the documents spread across the table. She could walk into court right now and end it all. Reveal the fraud, burn Alexander and Marcella in front of the world. But something held her back. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. If she rushed, they'd twist the story. They'd call her unstable, a liar, a bitter ghost rising from the dead to ruin a new family. The public loved redemption arcs. Alexander and Marcella had painted one perfectly. But Sophia? They'd tear her apart. So instead of war, she chose something more dangerous, patience. She moved quietly, transferred small funds from her hidden trust, investing under different names. Dominic helped her purchase silent shares in Alexander's company, enough to watch from inside. She didn't need to scream. She needed to dismantle, and that would take silence, control, and timing. We need to be careful, Dominic warned. Alexander has eyes everywhere. If he discovers you're alive before we're ready. Sophia placed her hand on her stomach, feeling her child move. He won't, she said with quiet certainty. He sees what he wants to see. He always has. Meanwhile, a private art exhibition was being planned. Marcella wanted to announce her pregnancy to high society, with flashing cameras and glittering chandeliers. Sophia smiled. Perfect. A stage was exactly what she needed. But she wouldn't go as herself. She would go as a mystery, a whisper, a ghost they thought they buried. Dominic ordered her a custom vintage veil, elegant but unforgettable. If you're going to haunt them, he said, make sure they remember the moment forever. Sophia slipped it on in front of the mirror. Her eyes burned with something new. Not pain, not fear. Power. The plan was simple. Watch Marcella celebrate lies, then pull the rug from under her. But not yet. Not until every guest was watching. Not until every light was on. Not until there was no way out. The exhibition glittered with golden gossip, but no one expected the storm that walked in wearing black. Sophia stepped through the grand entrance, veiled like a phantom, wrapped in elegance that screamed mystery and danger. Every heel click on the marble floor echoed like a forgotten memory. She wasn't just there to be seen. She was there to be remembered. People turned, gasped, whispered. The veil shimmered under the chandelier light, but it was her eyes, cold, sharp, haunted, that made them stop breathing. She glided through the gallery like a rumor made real, posing as a Dubai investor named Madame Uzra. She shook hands with men who once mocked her pain and women who once looked down on her tears. When she reached Alexander, his handshake lingered too long. Something in her perfume, in her poise, shook something inside him. His grip tightened, but his memory failed. He knew that feeling, that scent, that silence in her gaze, but the truth stayed buried. Marcella stood nearby, clinging to her champagne glass, her fake baby bump sitting awkwardly under her silver gown. Her eyes followed the mystery woman with rising fear, clutching Alexander's arm tighter. Sophia tilted her head, smiled beneath her veil, and accidentally dropped her glass of red wine at Marcella's feet. The splash soaked the silk, red staining the silver like blood. A sharp gasp spread through the room. Alexander rushed to Marcella's side, but the woman in black had already turned. She didn't run. She floated out, slow, graceful, deliberate, vanishing into the night like a ghost who had come back only to haunt. Alexander's heart raced. His eyes scanned the room all night. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't think, because those eyes, the ones behind the veil, felt like a ghost he once loved and never truly buried. Alexander couldn't shake the feeling. He wandered his mansion like a man haunted by shadows. The next morning, he opened a drawer in his office, searching for nothing but finding everything. A sketch. Her face. His own pencil strokes, drawn in a time when he still remembered how to love. He had burned every photo, deleted every memory, but this one had survived, tucked away, waiting. His hands trembled. Then came the envelope. No name, no stamp, just a note inside that said, "Truth always returns." He opened his laptop. Emails flooded in. Anonymous messages. Screenshots. Allegations. Words like fraud, embezzlement, betrayal. Whispers that he once thought were gone had returned with teeth. Investors were asking questions. Board members were nervous. Stocks dipped slightly, enough to sting. In the quiet, Alexander's hands shook. Meanwhile, miles away, Sophia sat in a small secret apartment, surrounded by screens. One showed Alexander's stock price. Another showed his calendar. And on the table in front of her sat files, blueprints, and plans, all marked with red ink. But her eyes didn't blink. This wasn't enough. Watching him panic didn't touch the scar he left. It didn't erase the way he let Marcella spit lies into the world while Sophia bled alone. Her heart had broken once. Now she wanted his empire to feel every crack. She leaned forward, clicked a folder. More proof. She was slowly turning into the storm they never saw coming. But even then, something was missing. Her mind kept circling back to Dominic, Alexander's half-brother, the only one who ever whispered the truth. When her phone buzzed, it was a message from Dominic. "Come now. I found it." She left immediately, and when she got there, what he handed her didn't just break her heart again. It ripped it wide open. Dominic didn't speak. He simply placed the photograph on the table and stepped back. Sophia stared at it. The room froze. In the photo, a younger Marcella sat beside an older man, the hand on her thigh, the necklace around her neck. She didn't have to ask. It was Alexander's father, the same man who had died suddenly just months before Alexander married Sophia. Dominic handed her a second file. Bank transfers, jewelry receipts, travel logs. Marcella had been his mistress for years. Sophia's voice broke as she whispered, "Alexander knew, didn't he?" Dominic nodded. Fully. Carefully. Alexander hadn't just married Marcella to move on. He married her to keep a secret buried. He knew she was his father's lover. He knew the scandal it would cause, so he married her to shut her up, to lock her in golden silence. But there was more. The pregnancy Marcella had used to trap him? Completely fake. Dominic had proof. Medical records. All falsified. The doctor had been paid off. The belly was a silicone prosthetic, one she removed every night. There was no baby. No future. Just a lie built to secure Marcella's grip on Alexander's money, on his empire, and on his guilt. Sophia couldn't breathe. The betrayal didn't just come from one man. It came from an entire family that watched her suffer and said nothing. She packed the documents herself. Every file, every receipt, every lie. She sealed them in an envelope. On the front, in bold red letters, she wrote, "For shareholders only." Dominic placed his hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready?" She nodded, but inside, her heart was no longer breaking. It was rebuilding. Stronger. Sharper. Deadlier. Because now it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. About exposing every last person who thought they could erase her and walk away clean. Sophia stared into the mirror, no longer seeing the woman who had cried on hospital floors or begged for the truth. She saw power. Control. Justice. Her lawyer called that morning. Her identity was fully reinstated. Her name was back on every document they tried to strip her from. The will was revalidated. Her child's inheritance, untouchable now. And Marcella's fraud, every fake report, every wire, every lie, legally documented, ready to be exposed. But Sophia wasn't going to do it quietly. She wasn't the silent victim anymore. She wasn't a sob story. She was the storm. She reached out to Alexander's biggest rival, Mr. Roth, a man Alexander once humiliated in public. Sophia offered him something better than revenge, ownership. Together, they crafted a plan. The shareholders' meeting was set for next Friday. Marcella and Alexander would be there, expecting nothing, bragging about numbers that were already sinking. And then Sophia would walk in, not as the wife they buried, but as the woman who held the pen to their downfall. The press still believed she was dead. They called it an unconfirmed tragedy. But the cameras would roll when she stepped out. The silence would break. The world would learn what happens when you try to erase a woman who built the very ground you walk on. The final move was simple. She pulled out the power suit she never got to wear. The one meant for the day she was supposed to be introduced as Alexander's partner in the company. She wore it now, not as his wife, but as the force that would destroy him. Her heels clicked down the hallway of the skyscraper penthouse. Just ahead, Marcella was laughing with shareholders, smiling, oblivious. Sophia kept walking. One step closer to everything. One step closer to the moment that would bring it all crashing down. The moment Sophia stepped into the grand shareholder's penthouse, silence slammed down like thunder. Her ivory power suit flowed like a ghost, the soft fabric clinging to her pregnant belly, glowing under the harsh lights. Every eye snapped toward her. Murmurs died on tongues. A single gasp broke the stillness, sharp, shocked, and raw. Alexander's hand jerked, the glass slipping from his grip and shattering against the marble floor. Marcella turned pale, her lips parting, but no air coming through. She stared at Sophia as if seeing a ghost, one she buried, but who returned stronger. Sophia didn't blink. She moved through the crowd like she belonged there, like no one could question her right. Her stare pierced everyone, calm and deadly. Alexander's mouth twitched, but no words came. His lie was standing in front of him, radiant, real, and pregnant with truth. Marcella clutched the edge of the table, trying to stay upright. No one moved. No one breathed. Sophia didn't need to scream. Her presence screamed for her. It told every secret, burned every fake truth. Her silence was louder than war. Then, without a word, she stopped in front of them all, Alexander, Marcella, the board, the press. She slowly reached into her white leather bag and pulled out an encrypted flash drive. The room leaned forward, caught in the storm of what was coming. Alexander's heart pounded so loud he thought everyone could hear it. Marcella's hand trembled, and Sophia, calm and steady, connected the drive to the presentation screen. A sharp click, then silence again. And then his voice filled the air, Alexander's voice, soft, sweet, and full of lies. "I swear to you, Marcella, we'll be rid of her. I promise." The room froze. Eyes widened. Faces twisted in shock. Cameras flashed. Reporters looked around, unsure if this was real. But Sophia didn't flinch. The recording continued. His voice again. "She's just a burden now. The baby wasn't even supposed to happen." The crowd gasped. A low cry echoed from one of the shareholders. Marcella's voice followed, soft and snake-like. "Just make sure she disappears before the baby comes. We'll take over the company, you and me." The air turned heavy. The walls seemed to breathe, pressing in on Alexander. He stared at the screen like it was alive, like it had teeth. Marcella's hand shot out, reaching for the remote, but Sophia stepped back. "Not yet," she said coldly, and pressed another button. More voices. More lies. A recording of Marcella pretending to cry in a doctor's office. "There's no heartbeat. I lost the baby." Gasps rippled again. Then a different voice, her friend. "But you were never pregnant. You faked everything." Chaos began to stir. Board members exchanged glances. The truth was here, and it was brutal. Sophia pressed the final clip. Alexander bragging to a friend about stealing company funds to cover Marcella's fake lifestyle. The room spun. Then silence, a silence full of judgment, betrayal, and fear. Then Sophia reached back into a bag, pulled out a thick envelope, and slammed it onto the table. "Legal documents," she said. "Would you like to read these next?" Alexander swallowed hard. Marcella backed away. But Sophia wasn't finished, not yet. Marcella turned sharply, eyes wide, ready to run. But Sophia stepped in her path, eyes locked like steel. The room held its breath. Marcella's lips quivered. "Move," she hissed. But Sophia didn't budge. Her voice was calm, cutting. "Why run now, Marcella? You loved the spotlight." Cameras clicked. Lights flashed. Sophia reached into a folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. "Recognize these?" She threw them on the table. Photos of Marcella with Alexander's father. Laughing. Kissing. Whispering in dark corners. A hush fell over the room. Alexander looked like he'd been punched. "That's not true," Marcella began, but Sophia raised a hand. "Receipts," she said, tossing paper after paper. Expensive jewelry paid in his name, delivered to your address. Marcella turned red, then white. It wasn't like that. What about the email you sent to the clinic asking for fake ultrasound prints? Another gasp. You used a fake baby to steal my life, my husband, my company. Marcella shook her head, words stumbling. It was his idea. Liar, Sophia snapped. You were the poison. But today it ends. Marcella backed into the table, her empire, her mask, all crumbling. Sophia's finger hovered over a remote. What are you doing? Marcella whispered. Ending the game, Sophia said, pressing the button. The screen behind them lit up. Everyone turned to look, and what they saw next made their hearts stop. The screen flashed white, then revealed the final truth. DNA test results confirmed Sophia's unborn child is biologically related to Alexander Montgomery. The room erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Shock. Sophia didn't blink. Alexander staggered, reaching for the chair behind him. That's my child, he muttered, as if the words were foreign. Marcella stood frozen. That can't be. That's not possible. Sophia turned, calm and collected. It is. You said I wasn't supposed to get pregnant, but I did. And I kept our child safe while you tried to erase us. Alexander's face paled. The board members stood, papers in hand, whispering rapidly. It also proves Marcella's pregnancy was fake, Sophia continued. There was never a second heir. Only lies. Marcella dropped into the nearest chair, staring blankly. Her lies had built castles in the sky, and now they were crashing down. I never meant to hurt, she tried, but her voice cracked. You didn't just hurt me, Sophia snapped. You tried to replace me, destroy me, but your lies couldn't kill the truth. Cameras captured every second. Reporters took notes like wildfire. With this proof, Sophia added, my child is the rightful heir, not your fantasy. Alexander looked at her, completely broken. Sophia, I didn't know. You just didn't care, she interrupted. Marcella covered her face. Her power was gone. Her plan had failed. It's over, Sophia said. And the world finally knows. Alexander looked up, face twisted in defeat. But Sophia wasn't done. She looked at him, and her eyes asked one question. What will she do with all this power now? Silence fell again, heavy and sharp. Then a board member cleared his throat. Ms. Sophia, we'd like to offer you full control of the company, he said. The shares, the title, the power, it's all yours. You've earned it. Sophia's heart raced. Everything she'd built, lost, and fought to reclaim was now before her. Another added, we'll support any legal action you take against those who wronged you. Alexander. Marcella. The power was intoxicating, but it came wrapped in pain. She turned to face them both. Alexander, her once husband, now a shattered man. Marcella, a woman who had lied, stolen, betrayed. You left me to bleed alone, she said, her voice low. And now you want forgiveness? Alexander didn't speak. Marcella sobbed, mascara streaming. Please, she cried. Don't ruin my life. Sophia looked down at her baby bump. You tried to ruin mine, she said, and almost succeeded. The room watched, frozen. You have the power to end them, a board member whispered. What do you want to do? Sophia took a deep breath. Her heart ached. Her soul screamed. She had dreamed of this day, but now that it was here, it felt heavy, like revenge had a cost, like justice came with blood. She walked toward Alexander, who looked up at her with empty eyes. This is your last chance, he whispered. Please. But Sophia didn't move. Her eyes didn't blink. And the world leaned forward, waiting for her answer. Would she show mercy, or would she bury them both? Sophia turned, her voice loud and clear. I'll press charges. The room fell deathly still. Not just against her, she added, pointing at Marcella, but against you, Alexander. A wave of shock crashed over the crowd. Alexander's jaw dropped. No, he whispered, stepping forward. Please don't do this. You did this, she replied. You betrayed me. You stole from me. And you tried to erase our child. Security stepped into the room. Marcella screamed as they grabbed her arms. Let go of me. This is all a lie. You can't do this. But they did. She was dragged away, kicking, her voice echoing down the halls like a dying siren. Cameras followed every step. Her rage would be replayed across every screen. Alexander backed away, tears forming. I didn't want it to end like this, he said. I loved you once. Once, Sophia replied. But when I needed you, you vanished. The officers moved toward Alexander. You'll regret this, he said, voice shaking. You'll regret everything. But she didn't flinch. You regret losing control, she said. I regret ever trusting you. He was handcuffed, his tailored suit wrinkled, his silk tie undone, his pride gone. Cameras captured the moment as he was led away. Reporters shouted his name. His image, once polished, now ruined, flashed across every screen. Sophia stood still. The world had flipped. She was no longer the broken wife. She was justice. As Alexander disappeared, she didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just stood there, carrying her baby, her power, and the silence of the past. The final blow had landed, but something even bigger was still coming. The cameras flashed like lightning. Sophia stood tall, the ivory power suit now a symbol of war won. Her baby bump, once a mark of weakness in their eyes, now stood for power, life, and truth. She faced the press, her voice strong. I was the wife you tried to drown, she said, her eyes piercing the lens. Now watch me rise. Silence followed, then whispers of awe. Reporters captured every second. Headlines began forming in real time. Sophia Montgomery takes back empire. Fake pregnancy exposed. Justice delivered. Behind her, the board nodded in silent respect. The woman they once doubted now led them. The lies didn't kill me, she continued. They made me stronger. Marcella's screams faded down the corridor. Alexander's face, broken, handcuffed, would haunt headlines for weeks. But Sophia was done looking back. She had a future to build for herself and her child. She had reclaimed more than a company. She had reclaimed her name, her strength, her truth. And no one could take that again. But as she turned from the cameras, a question lingered in her heart. The empire was now hers, but at what cost? Could power fill the hole they had carved in her soul? Could victory undo the pain? The wind kissed Sophia's face as she stood on the cliff looking out at the vast ocean 5 years later. It had been the ocean that had once carried her home after her mountain fall, that had witnessed her rebirth. But now, standing on its edge, she felt the waves whisper a different story. Her story. The past was still there, lingering in the corners of her mind. The pain, the loss, the betrayal. It all had its place in her journey. But she had won, not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been silenced, every woman who had ever been told she wasn't enough. She had fought and survived, and now she was free. Sophia's eyes misted with tears as she looked down at Victoria, her daughter, standing beside her. She had built this life for them, for both of them. The ocean no longer held the power it once did. The wind that had once carried her fears now lifted her spirit. She whispered softly to herself. They thought I drowned, but I learned to swim. Her triumph was quiet, but it was hers. Every step she had taken had led her to this moment, this peaceful victory. And as the wind kissed her face once more, Sophia knew that she was no longer the woman who had been destroyed by betrayal. She was the woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes. And nothing would ever take that away from her.